Relations Committee will be meeting with Secretaries Mattis and Tillerson later today. He joins me now here at home base. Thank you so much, Senator, for being here. Well, first of all, there's been some criticism that there's a lack of an overall strategy, an overarching strategy, where there's talk about military options, where many experts say there really isn't a really viable first strike option given the retaliatory power of North Korea and the proximity of our neighbors and allies, of North Korea's neighbors and our allies. What is your message to the administration as we face these twin threats?
Well, later today, as you mentioned, the Foreign Relations Committee is going to meet in a classified briefing with Secretaries Mattis and Tillerson. The topic is reviewing the authorization of the use of military force. The president continues to undertake military action in a number of countries under an AUMF that is woefully out of date. It dates back to 2001.
And but just to point out, this is something that President Obama and also President Bush did as well. So this is an argument that you and Senator Kaine and others have been making forcefully, but without getting
on a bipartisan basis. The committee has been trying to move forward with a new authorization, but I'll be asking questions, as I expect will other senators of both parties, about strategy with regards to North Korea and Afghanistan, two places where we haven't yet heard a clear statement of strategy from the president or from his secretaries of defense or state.
They have been doing a review of the Afghanistan strategy, but we still don't know whether or not there's going to be additional troop deployments. What do you think should be happening?
Well, I think there's clearly division in the White House between advisors who say we should reduce our footprint and only be doing counterterrorism, and those who say that we should be strengthening our force on the ground and getting our NATO allies to continue the long-term effort. I'd need to get a classified briefing on the Taliban and what is most likely to push them to negotiations. I don't want to see us lose the gains that we've made in Afghanistan, but I also question whether there is a strategy to win or whether we're simply trying to avoid losing.
And when we get back to North Korea and to Russia, there seem to be so many different messages coming out of this White House. What do you want to see? Let's take it first about Russia. What should the president be doing in response to Vladimir Putin kicking out 755 U.S. staff?
Well, I'm glad the president signed the Russia sanctions bill today, but I'm struck that he did so not making a strong statement against Russia and their interference in our 2016 election.
In fact, he makes a strong statement against all of you.
He made a strong statement against the Congress, which was a striking choice in terms of timing. I think the president needs to be clear that he sees Putin for the threat that he is to our allies across Western Europe, to our democracy, and to our future. Because I think we should try and have better relations with Putin, but that'll only happen if we stand up to Putin and are tougher in the face of his aggression, and I think that has to begin with the president.
Let's talk about the State Department and Rex Tillerson. He said yesterday to us in his first briefing, I should note, that the diplomats he speaks with say, help us fix this situation, this mess is certainly what's implied, rather than taking responsibility for what has been widely reported as a demoralized institution, hollowed out, mass exodus of career foreign service.
Well, as someone who's on the appropriations subcommittee that funds the State Department, I'm gravely concerned by the Trump administration's proposed deep cuts to the State Department. That still hasn't been resolved. I think the tension between Secretary Tillerson saying months ago that our strategy with regards to North Korea is a diplomatic one, and we're going to try and put every force we can out there in the world in our ambassadors to try and press our allies, to press China, to press North Korea. That's in real contrast to a budget proposal that would slash our State Department by more than a third. I am hopeful that Democrats and Republicans will come together to sustain funding for diplomacy and development, but I think Secretary Tillerson also needs to show leadership within the State Department and make it clear that he also isn't going to see significant layoffs and significant cuts in the State Department if we want them to be a key part of our leadership in the world.
But so far there's been a job freeze, and he has yet to fill key positions.
That's right.
The acting assistant secretaries are all acting,
empty. That's
and
right.
They're mostly empty, no undersecretaries. So what signal is that sending? Because he is advocating for these 30% cuts, and even if you and Senator Corker, the chair, push back, if you end up with 15% cuts, that's a whole new baseline for the State Department.
That's right. And I think that uncertainty is really destabilizing the career Foreign Service, the civil servants, the folks who service all around the world, often in difficult and dangerous posts, need to know that they're going to have the support to be able to carry forward their functions. A 30% cut, even a 15% cut for a role as important as our State Department would be significant. And I do think that is distracting our career diplomats from what ought to be their principal focus, which is making us safe through working with our allies to contain North Korea's dangerous nuclear program, to continue to push back on Iran's nuclear efforts, and to make sure that we've got a positive future with regards to Russian aggression.
And now the president is, with tweets, blaming China for its failure to rein in North Korea, which has been a universal criticism within Democratic and Republican circles. But now there's talk that he's going to go unilaterally and slap China with all kinds of trade sanctions, not going through the World Trade Organization, but rolling out the old 301 provisions, which were unilateral U.S. sanctions.
If he does that, I would expect a strong counter response from China. It would have some real consequences, particularly for some of our agricultural exports, which is one of our most robust export sectors. My hope would be that he would consult with Congress before taking a decisive action that would have significant consequences for our economy. But I do think it's time for us to come up with a strategy to push China to action against North Korea. Our timeline for containing North Korea is getting short, and the threat to the United States is real.
Thank you so much, Senator Coons. Good to see you. And coming up, the White House fighting back against a lawsuit alleging that their involvement in a fake news story, and this is a fake news story,